It's just you take advantage of these opportunities as they arise. They won't all pan out, but something's going to happen. Something will lead to something that leads to something. That job wouldn't fly. Like, I would just be having FOMO, fear of missing out on the family. Maybe that's FOMO every evening that I'm working the baseball games. So yeah, that's a great question, because I started realizing that too. And it started to shape in my mind what I wanted for myself when it came to the professional side of my life. I had the personal side was great. I had a wife, we bought a house, we ended up having kids. Fantastic. But it was the professional side where I was lacking. That job started shaping what I really wanted out of a job. When I started that, I said, I'm burning the boats. The bridges are toast. There's no going back. There's no plan B. I'm turning this into a business because this is the key to my career, my professional happiness. And as we all know, your career and your professional life, it bleeds into your personal life, whether you want it to or not. If I'm not happy at my job doing what I do, which for me was I wasn't going to be happy unless I was calling the shots and running my business, then I was going to have a tough personal life too.
Welcome to Unlocking Moves, where we want to cover those key pivotal moments that really change the lives of successful entrepreneurs and leaders. And I want to hear their stories because I think we learn the most from stories. But I don't want to hear just your glory story. I want to hear your gory story because, as I like to say, the bigger the shit show, the bigger the lesson. My guest today is someone in a similar space to me. He's a very successful entrepreneur with Ricochet Digital Marketing. And he's also the host of a podcast called the Millionaire University podcast. We're going to get into all of that on the show. But before we do, Brien, I like to hit my guests up with an off-the-wall question or comment to really keep them on their toes, keep my audience on their toes. You ready for this?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So most people on their LinkedIn like to brag about how great they are. I can't, there's all this thing about your ego and your pride. You want to tell everybody how great you are. But I got to tell you, on one of your LinkedIn jobs, you maybe taking the opposite approach. So I want to dig into that a little bit. So first of all, one of your first jobs was manager of business development for the Spyglass Group. And what you said about your job is a quote, "They hired me to increase sales, which I absolutely did not do. I was terrible at this job, sold absolutely nothing, and even had to forfeit my one commission." So Brien, we love to keep it real. You got to tell me about that period in your life, man. That's awesome.
Yeah. As you can tell, I keep it real too, apparently, right? That was my first job out of college. So graduated in 2013, moved to Cleveland, Ohio. And honestly, that was because my then girlfriend, now wife, was going to grad school at Case Western. So I was like, I got to be where she is because I'm going to marry this girl. And first job, I didn't know, I was an English major in college. Took me 2 years to figure that out. And then once I was hitting graduation, my dad's like, "What are you going to do?" And I said, "I don't know, Dad." I had no clue. And he's like, "Go get into sales." So I took a job at that company called Spyglass. Telecom expense management is what we were selling. And my job was to smile and dial 100, 150 times a day to the state of Wisconsin, calling on controllers, comptrollers, CFOs, anybody near or in the C-suite at a mid to large size company who handles finance. And my job was to try and book a meeting for an outside sales rep. And boy, oh boy, did I get a crash course in life and a little look at corporate life. At least that was corporate enough to me because I had to dress up and sit in a cubicle. And man, Kurt, did I hate it. I freaking hated it. I will always say I learned a lot. I don't regret it, but I just did what I was told to do. Go learn sales. Okay. So I learned it. We were supposed to turn into these trained killers, book meetings, move on up, become an outside rep, make all sorts of money, blah, blah, blah. Well, what we were selling was boring as shit. And I didn't have fun doing it. I was terrible on the phone. I had no confidence. I was 22, 23 years old, scared as all get out. I had a sales manager breathing down my neck. And I'll never forget the day I quit. I had a sales manager, he was not a nice guy. I don't know, whatever. He'll never hear this, so whatever. But maybe he does. Maybe he's a huge fan of Kurt. I don't know. But he's basically like, here's what's going to happen. You're going to go make this phone call. You're going to close this person. And we had a minimum threshold of what these people had to spend in order to book a meeting. It was like $1,500. So I'm sitting there, I'm like, oh my gosh, okay. So I dial the number, got my headset on. We're calling some company. Turns out to be a really small company in, Sheboygan, right? A little old lady answers, hello. And I go through the script, follow it to a T. The guy's over my shoulder. I'm sweating bullets. And I get to the point where the little lady was just like, oh, we don't spend enough. We spend about $400. I think we're doing pretty good. And the sales manager said, you have to close this person. I don't care if they're minimum spend. You have to close them. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, well, it's decision time. And the nice guy in me took over and said, oh, you know what, Gladys, that's okay. You don't spend enough. I think you're doing great. Have yourself a great day. And I just remember clicking the phone and just like, I don't know if people see on video, I just turned around to the sales manager and he's just like fuming. And the end of that day, I walked into the manager's office and I said, yep, I'm out. I'll see you. He's like, that's okay. We were going to can you anyway. So, but that was the long-winded way of saying I learned a whole lot about what I don't want to do with my life at that first job.
That's awesome, and I love that. We're going to get into that more on the show, but I want to hear some of those formative years because I sold encyclopedias door to door one summer in college, and I learned many of the same lessons, it sounds like. So, hey, as you can tell, my guest today is Brien Gearin. Brien is the founder and CEO of Ricochet Digital Marketing. He's also, as I said before, the host of the Millionaire University podcast, which has over 500,000 monthly downloads. So this guy is legit. And on the podcast, they teach and inspire the next generation of entrepreneurs. That's going to sound very familiar with many in my audience. Brien, welcome to Unlocking Moves.
Kurt, man, thank you so much for having me. I know I had you on the MU pod and we had a blast. So it was a privilege to have an invitation to join you today.
Let's go. Let's go. Hey, I want to start with your story. I know just way back, you played baseball. You even played it in high school, and you had a job with the Cincinnati Reds after, or maybe during your years at the University of Dayton. Actually, you know what? Tell me a little bit about that, because as I read it, it looks like you were the suite ambassador. And honestly, I thought suite ambassadors were much better looking than you, so I don't know where to take that.
No, you're totally accurate with that. Somehow, with this face for radio, I ended up in front of the owner's box for 4 seasons with the Reds. So, yeah, that was my summer job in college. For years, I was an entrepreneur before I knew it. I was mowing lawns, making money, and playing baseball at night through grade school and through high school. And then in college, I was like, you know what? It'd be really cool to work for the Reds somehow. I love baseball. There's got to be a way to get a paycheck with the Reds logo on it, even though I'm not swinging the bat or throwing the baseball. So every year they have seasonal positions that you can apply for, and they have like open interviews. So I went down that winter during my freshman year and just went to see what they had. And one of them that looked attractive was working out in the suite level. And essentially, it's a glorified ticket taker. Like it was nothing crazy. I think it paid like $9.50 an hour, something like that. The Reds are notoriously cheap, so you weren't making much doing that. But it ended up being a really cool gig because I got to mostly spend my time right outside the owner's box. So I was on a first name basis with the owners. They entertained a lot of cool people, whether it was celebrities or Cincinnati celebrities. Especially, I got to meet the whole Big Red Machine. Got a handful of autographs, and it was a really great job because I had always had an interest in customer service. Like customer experience is a big thing for me. And the guy who was running the customer experience department with the Reds obviously was in charge of all the seasonal people. And we learned the quote unquote Reds way of customer experience, which is very similar to, if people are familiar with the I forget what they call it at Disney, it's the equivalent of the Disney way, right? And this guy had also led the turnaround at Delta Airlines in the early 2000s. So it was a really cool opportunity to work with him and understand and learn the customer experience in that manner. But yeah, it was a really cool summer job. Got to meet a lot of cool people, learn a lot. And my office was the Ballpark. So every night, every afternoon, I'd be down there and get to hang out at the Reds Stadium. So it was pretty cool.
So I like that. First of all, I love that you learned from your formative years and how to treat people well and learn from some experts in the space. And I also loved how you saw an opportunity and you seized it. You made the call. You felt like you wanted to work in the Reds organization, and you did it. A lot of people long for that or wish for that or want for that, but they don't really take that step. So I appreciate you sharing that with us. Now, I want to touch on this real quick. 2 things. First of all, I told you before, I'm a huge Cincinnati Reds fan, which is very hard to do, especially when you grew up in South Louisiana. So,
Yeah.
figure that one out. The quick story is my mom worked for Procter and Gamble, and the Reds were really good when I was growing up in the mid '70s. So I've just latched
Yep.
onto them and
There
never
you
let
go.
go. The
Reds
other thing
country.
that's interesting is when you work at a ballpark, for my listeners, it's going to sound very exotic. Oh my gosh, this guy got to go to the ballpark every night and it was awesome. Tell me about what it was like. And I know you only did it for 2 summers. Tell me what you think it might have been like if that was your job and you had to be there every night. 81 games they play at home and from 3 o'clock to midnight. I mean, tell me about that.
Yeah, Kurt. So it's actually, when I first got that job, I'm like, this is gonna be great. This is working at the Reds. This is awesome. And of course, this was before I had a wife or kids, right? So there are no responsibilities outside of, the game went to extras. You don't get home till 1:30 in the morning. Who cares, right? I got there in an extra, $20, right? But after a while, you start doing a lot of observing of the people who are the full-time employees there. And working on the suite level, we interacted with the sales staff a lot and the catering staff. And these were folks who were, especially the sales team, they're probably getting in the office at 9 o'clock and they're on duty, especially managing suite ticket holders through the whole game. Like they probably didn't get home. They were probably allowed to leave in like the 7th inning or something, if I had to guess. They were always around. And I know they're making peanuts unless they're, obviously sales is sales, right? Like unless you're the top 1%, it's really tough to make at least a halfway decent living, right? Maybe that varies by industry and location, but I saw that and I was like, ticket, that'd be pretty cool doing sales and getting to hang out at the ballpark, entertain, a book of clientele. And I started meeting some of these people, talking with them and seeing their job. And after a while, I was like, man, like these folks are never home for dinner. And I know some of them have little kids and, baseball's cool and all, but you're gone all summer, like all spring, all summer, and most, the early fall. Like it was a lot. So I started thinking to myself, and I even started wanting to kind of work like full time in the customer experience department because I really enjoyed that work and serving others. It was really cool for me. There wasn't positions available, and the guy who ran the show was kind of a one-man show. So the opportunity wasn't necessarily there. But after a while, I kind of started realizing, that's okay. Like, I don't think, especially once I got married and started having kids, I was like, that job wouldn't fly. Like, I would just be having FOMO, fear of missing out on the family. Maybe that's FOMO off every evening that I'm working the baseball games. So, yeah, that's a great question because I started realizing that too. And it started to shape in my mind what I wanted for myself when it came to the professional side of my life. I had the personal side was great. I had a wife, we bought a house, we ended up having kids, fantastic. But it was the professional side where I was lacking. And that job started shaping what I really wanted out of a job.
I like it. Again, learning every step of the way. So that job was before the shitty sales job at Spyglass.
That's right.
So we talked about that a little bit in the intro, but tell me about the lessons that you learned as in that cold calling sales environment, lessons that you learned that you're able to take with you. If you're just joining us on Unlocking Moves, today's episode is brought to you as usual by HireBetter, the strategic talent partner for growth-minded entrepreneurs everywhere.
Yeah, man, there was a lot, good and bad lessons. I learned what it's like to get rejected a lot and, get that ego just torched. I was probably 4 months into the job and there was a guy who was just hired out of college. Everybody there was hired out of college. It was like a frat house in there. But this guy came in and he was crushing it, just sitting next to me, booking meeting after meeting after meeting. And he's a pretty arrogant guy. And he started giving me pointers. And I'm sitting there like, who are you to give me pointers? But then, I started learning like, you know what? Somebody who's good at what they do, it doesn't matter how old they are. Like maybe you ought to listen because it's working for this guy. So I learned a lot of humility in that job. I learned a lot of being able to take rejection. I learned that I think one of the biggest things I learned is that my method of selling is relational and not hard, not pushy, not cold, right? And that's started bearing fruit years down the road in my own businesses. But that and, just a handful of sales lessons, like well, I didn't really learn how to close because I didn't close anyone, but other than that one person who didn't show for the meeting and they took back my $50, not bitter or anything, but yeah, I think those are probably the biggest lessons I learned from that. And just learning it turned out to be like a funnel, right? I just started chipping away at what I know I don't want to do.
Okay, so you're working for a company that you learned a lot of lessons on what not to do. It sounds like you learned how not to manage, perhaps from the ogre that was looking over your shoulder. You also learned that you don't need to be a seasoned veteran to be able to give you advice. And honestly, you probably actually, I love how you framed up that you learned that it wasn't just about sales and trying to sell something that they didn't need. You're actually trying to build relationships and rapport and serve people. Tell me about that, because I saw a quote somewhere online about that.
Yeah, I mean, I learned that there where it's like, I can't be this pushy guy who's supposed to come in and be just a certified killer salesman. I found myself having long conversations with these nice people. Thank God my state was Wisconsin. A lot of nice people up there. So any of you Wisconsinites listening, congratulations. You're very nice. And I would start like having conversations with some of the people. I'd actually get on the phone, and we, 10 minutes later, they'd be like, "Oh, I know you're calling about our telecom bill, and we really don't spend that much, and our controller's doing a great job keeping that spend under wraps. But hey, it's been great talking baseball with you. I really appreciate the call." And I would get off that call, and it would almost be like I had a sale, because I was like, "Oh, that was nice. That was a cool conversation. That was a nice person." And then, you go to the big board and you're like, that's still a zero. And I hated that feeling. It was I guess it was more of my desire to build a relationship than to just get the sale.
It's funny. I'm not a salesperson myself, although I quote, make a lot of sales, but it's all through serving people, as you described. I consider myself a biz dev person or relationship sales. People will come to me because of trust or whatever. But whenever I try to sell, it comes across as disingenuous, and it's not really, I'm not effective at it. I'm not the killer, as you described. And I've had people in the past I call them howdy meetings. They would have a lot of breakfasts and coffees and lunches and dinners or whatever, and they spend a lot of money and have a great discussion, but never close a sale. So I think those are probably more of the Brien Gearin and Kurt Wilkin type sales folks, and not the stone cold killer.
Yeah, those are probably more of the trust building meetings, right? Once somebody feels they can trust you and they know that you have the solution to their problem, and you've clearly articulated it and you described how you do it, it might not happen in a single meeting. It typically doesn't happen in a single meeting, right? And it's one of those where it's better too, as the person who's doing we're all salesmen. We're all selling somebody on something, whether we realize it or not. It's just a matter of how you do it. And if you've built this relationship, now you have a stronger bond in a professional relationship, and it's more likely the customer is going to stay with you, right? Because you've put in the time to build the relationship. It's the long-term play, but at the end of the day, we're all here for the long term.
I think you're absolutely right. So let's flash forward. I know right now, and maybe 7 years ago, you founded the Ricochet digital marketing group, and something between this shitty salesperson and Ricochet, you decided to be an entrepreneur. Tell me a little bit about the steps along the journey and what made you pull the trigger.
Yeah. So going back to that first job that I quit, I had 2 weeks before I ran out of money. I had maybe $2,000 to my name, right?
And probably an unhappy father as well.
Yeah, I'm sure my dad wasn't thrilled. He wouldn't say that, but I'm sure he wasn't thrilled. And I had 2 weeks to figure it out before I ran out of money, and I'd have to move home. And what was driving me at the time was, I got to stay up here because I'm going to propose to my girlfriend, and I don't want to be away from her, right? Like that's what was driving me. And I said, all right, I got to make a list of what am I good at and what do I think I'd like to do.
Pause there for a second, Brien, because I know many future father-in-laws also do not like their daughters marrying unemployed, scumbags, right? So.
Right. Well, and I'll tell you, 2 weeks before I quit, I bought the engagement ring.
Well, so, was it 10 weeks salary or something? It was probably still
Yeah, it was, I took advantage of the deal of financing at 0% for 1 year. So at the time it was probably, I don't know, $400 a month, like something. I was just like, I don't even understand credit, but that's a great ring and I'm going to marry her. So give it to me, guy. And so, and then 2 weeks later, I took my wife out to what I would consider at that time a fairly expensive dinner. And I told her, hey, and I quit my job today. Yeah, Chili's, right? And she's like, wait, what? And I was like, oh yeah, no, I just really hated it. So I'm out. And she's like, sweet. Okay, what are you going to do? And I was like, I don't know. That's a great question. It kind of hit me at that time. I'm like, huh, all right. So I made a list of what am I good at and what do I think I'd like to do. And what I put together was lawn care. And this was after about a week of trying to think of a business idea. Cause it was at this time, I'm like, screw this corporate America. Like that was bad. I hated that. That cannot be my life. 8 to 5 sitting in a cube, talking to people on a phone I don't even like. And I had, at the time, I've actually never told anyone this. I had an idea about ride sharing, about taxis. Cause I lived in right near downtown Cleveland. And this was right when Uber was becoming a thing. So it was like, to me at that time, it wasn't even in Cleveland. It was kind of conceptual. And I was like, oh, this could be a good time to get in on this. I can make flyers. I can go to the bar. I can, I'll start out in my car. It'll be great. I'll start adding to it. And you quickly scrap that after reality set in. And so I ended up in Lawncare, got a job through a post on Craigslist. And it just so happened that the guy who owns this company met with me to hire me as a lawn care technician. It was an organic lawn care company, which organic doesn't work, folks. Sorry, but spreading chicken shit don't work. And the guy who owns the company was an entrepreneur, and he came in and said, hey, by the way, you're a young guy. If you have any interest in entrepreneurship, I want to grow this company and have owners of this company start another branch in another city. And you're from Cincinnati, right? I said, yeah, I am from Cincinnati. We don't plan to be in Cleveland forever. And he says, once you have kids, you're going to move home. And he said, would you be interested in working towards opening a branch of this company in Cincinnati? And I was like, holy crap, ding, ding, ding. This is the chance to be an entrepreneur. Here it is. So I said, absolutely, let's go. And for 2 years, I worked closely under him. I started at the ground level, $9 an hour, spreading fertilizer and, learning about lawn care. And fun side fact, I love lawn care, like landscaping, lawn care. That's my thing. I renovated my yard at our house when we bought it. Like, you ask me about any cultivar of grass, I've got you covered. So I did that for 2 years. The second year, my wife, she had graduated, got a job in Columbus, and thankfully there was already a branch of this company in Columbus. He said, that's perfect. Go work under our owner down there, take another year to learn from him, and then we'll talk about starting up in Cincinnati. So I did that for 2 years. Towards the end of the 2 years, I started not believing in the product. And because it was organic, it wasn't working. I did a lot of studying, yada, yada. Anyway, it didn't end up working out. And it was okay because at the time I was so young, I didn't feel confident that I could do it. I didn't have that confidence to be able to be like owning a piece of a company, right? Could I have done it? Absolutely. But at the time I didn't have the confidence. And my wife had took a job in Indy. I was like, all right, we're out. So, but that planted that entrepreneurial bug that there's something I could do here. So that was between that. I then worked for my father-in-law for 2.5, 3 years. And it was on the side of doing his sales and marketing that I learned myself a lot of marketing. I wanted to get more into the marketing side, bringing business in. And I started building Ricochet on the side back in 2017. So,
nice. So you taught yourself digital marketing, SEO, SEM, all the things.
Yeah, I took a course through a company out in California. It was an online course. It was kind of a holistic digital marketing thing because I was like, what's this digital marketing? There's something here. I took this course and you learned about web building, HTML, everything you just listed, all the marketing stuff. One of the sections was how to run Facebook ads. And you had the opportunity to run real live ads for this education company. And out of like 5,000 students, my ads finished in the top 5 in terms of results over the month or 2 months or whatever that we ran them. And I was like, there's something there. I could do that. I'm good at writing. I was an English major. I clearly did something right. There's something there. So this ends in January. And in that, it was like 2 weeks later, I'm sitting there, I'm like, there's something I can do with this. There's something here. And I got an email from a personal finance blogger that I've been following that said a personal finance blogger friend of his was opening a course teaching people how to run Facebook ads for small local businesses as a little side hustle, make an extra 1 or 2K a month, right? And I was like, there's something here. $300. I put it in there and I talked to the guys when I joined. I said, look, this is great as a side hustle, but clearly you guys turn this into an agency. There's a business model here. That's what I want to do. And they said, hop on in. We're going to teach you how to do that. So that $300, it basically bought me 2 mentors and a coaching community. I learned a technical skill, which I did not have a technical skill. I had interpersonal skills. I could talk to people. I could help people verbally, but I couldn't do anything technical. And that gave me my first technical skill that I then parlayed into a full service agency.
Wow. I want to comment on some of what you just said, Brien, and that is you weren't happy doing just the job. You wanted to be an entrepreneur, so the seeds were planted. But you didn't just wait for opportunity to come to you. You sought it out and you took the course and you learned how to do it and you found out you were good at it and you enjoy doing it. All those things added up to becoming a hell of an entrepreneur, but you didn't, again, sit and wait to make your unlocking move happen. You seized the opportunity. That's what this show is all about.
Yeah, there was multiple moments for me about the time when I left that lawn job and started working for my father-in-law. I was remote 3 or 4 days a week for that because he was in a different town in Indiana. We were in Indianapolis, about an hour and a half away. And I had a lot of time to sit there alone in the apartment And it didn't take me too long to do the work I needed to do for my position. So I had a lot of time to be like, what am I doing? Like, what does my life look like when I'm 45? Like, it's not doing this. As much as I love my father-in-law, I wasn't going to work for him forever. And I wasn't going to be pushing chicken shit forever, right? Like, I'm not one of those where I can sit on a line and hit 3 buttons all day long. I can't do it. And that was just the catalyst of multiple moments of I've got to figure something out, because I just got married. We hadn't yet had kids, but that was our goal. And I was like, how are we going to pay for this? My wife has a great job. She makes good money, but it's not going to be enough to support a whole family. Like, I can't be the leaky wheel here.
Man, that's awesome. And what a lot of people do, especially in today's day and age, is, sit back and they get an extra 4 or 5 hours in the day that they are being paid for and play video games or go to Starbucks or, whatever the case may be. And you took that time and that opportunity to make something more of yourself. Congratulations, man. That's awesome.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, I got to always be productive.
So you started this as a side hustle, but by the way, I've got part of my book has a chapter about side hustles called Side Hustle Sam. We can get into that in a little bit, but now you've turned it into a quote real business. Tell me a little bit about Ricochet.
Yeah, so Ricochet Digital Marketing, we've done a lot in the last 7 years. It started as just a small agency, a one-man band doing Facebook ads for small local businesses. And my wife and I moved to a suburb here in Cincinnati at just the right time when it was a kind of a eastern suburb of town that was just kind of getting revitalized. Like, a lot of businesses were just about to move into town. So I had a lot of people to go talk to, and I joined the Chamber of Commerce. And that was kind of my first step into actually getting clients. And the president of the chamber said, we'd love to have you. Nobody does this. Also, can you do a lunch and learn? Can you get in front of people and talk about what you do? And I was like, yeah, I haven't spoke in public speaking since my course in college, but sure, why not? So I did a Facebook ads 101, had 8 meetings, booked 2 new clients out of it. And I was like, all right, there's something here. So yeah, Ricochet, it started as just Facebook ads. Then we started adding Google ads. When I started recognizing that, I started getting a few more clients. Some of them asked about their Google machine. I said, you know what? That's a great question. I had an intro to a guy who is still my teammate now that handles our Google Ads accounts, does a fantastic job. And I got introduced to him. He said, yeah, let's work together on this. There's opportunity here. Let's do it. So I added another service. And then as I started learning more and more about what we're doing, we added Google Business Profile Management. Then we added email newsletter marketing. Then we added we started adding direct mail. And then last year we added web development, which was a huge catalyst for business in just the last 12 months. So, we've got 4 teammates now that work with us. So slowly over time, we started developing, honing in on what we do, getting better at what we do, having results for clients. Started, referral networks started growing. I did a ton of networking, learned a lot about that, still always learning about that. And then, now into the playbooks that we offer, where we can work with newer businesses, whether they're doing 150K a year or if they're doing 15 million a year. We have a playbook that they can use, that they need to be able to use, and we have the team to be able to execute it for them. Because we work more so now with home service provider businesses, and they don't have the time, desire, or knowledge to handle all these things on their own. That's why agencies and marketing companies and freelancers exist, right?
Yeah.
So it's our job to help them grow their business. It's just the vehicle happens to be, for the most part, digital marketing. And we're starting even to get into consulting with companies where our marketing might expose some internal infrastructure problems, where they have follow-up issues, or they're not answering the phone, or they've got people problems, they've got sales problems. So it's been a heck of a journey, and it's starting to proliferate now. There's possible partnership and rebrand in the works. So there's a lot going on, man. It's been a ton of fun.
Awesome. Now there's going to be, you're doing good by helping people build their businesses. That's going to make you feel good. But I do have a question for you. And that is, so you said you have a playbook for these folks. Without giving away the secret sauce, like, what are the top 2 or 3 things that me as an entrepreneur myself trying to sell more online, what would be some of the key tips you'd tell me?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's the same, whether you're a $100,000 business or you're $1 million plus business. The playbook is essentially the same, and it starts with your website. You've got to have a great website that's built to the specifications of search engines, mainly Google, right? Got to be discoverable. People have to be able to find you online and submit their information so you can call them or they can call you directly. Then you've got to have your Google business profile managed. Google is starting to place an outsized emphasis on these profiles. They're starting to move to a zero click-through conversion where they want you to do everything that you need to do to get a local service from Google. So that means these profiles have to be in tip-top shape. They have to be consistently managed and managed well. And then we get into your retention. So retention marketing being your email newsletters. People, small businesses sleep on email newsletters all the time. It's something where they're like, I need to do that, but I don't have the time. It's always backburnered, right? But for those who use it consistently, whether it's weekly, biweekly, or at least monthly, now they're able to start building community with the people who know, like, and trust them, their buyers, right? You can put your prospects on that list, stay in contact with them. You can send special messages, but at minimum, you're keeping in contact with a newsletter. And then, so that's basically, those are the three things that our smaller companies who aren't ready to invest in paid advertising, a lot of them do just fine with those three things. Then we get into the paid side. So we're talking Google search ads, Google local service ads.
Hey, real
and then
quick, let's
Facebook
summarize
ads.
those three things. So website and newsletter. What was the third one?
And Google business profile.
Perfect.
Yeah, like a small business, a sub seven-figure business, even a seven-figure business can get a hell of a lot of benefit from just those three items.
Yeah, I like the newsletter is absolutely slept on, as you said, and people, somebody that already knows you, already is in your network, and they just don't remember about you out whenever they have the need. They need to be reminded every now and then.
Right. And if you're a local service provider, a big part of your business should be referrals, and it should be your referral program. What's a great way to constantly remind people about the service you provided them, the great service that they got, and the fact that they can maybe get $100 check if they send their neighbor or their mom and dad over to you? The newsletter. You constantly remind them of that.
Love it. Awesome. Hey, let's, I want to shift gears for a second and talk about Millionaire University podcast. So tell me a little bit about that. As I said, one of the things you guys are trying to do is teach and inspire the next generation of entrepreneurs. And then I'm sure there's obviously a segue into what Millionaire University is. So tell me a little bit about that relationship and how it came about and what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. So Millionaire University, the brainchild of that is Justin and Tara Williams. They're a couple out in California. They were wildly successful in the real estate space, flipping 100 homes a year through their systems and processes. They developed an online school that taught other people their systems and processes. They sold that for multiple seven figures. And it was a scenario where they could have gone off and sailed into the sunset and not worked another day in their life between their investments and their buyout. And their son was turning 18 soon and deciding on college or not. And Justin was a football player at BYU. He got injured, dropped out of school his second semester senior year because he's like, what am I doing here? School's not doing anything for me. He sold satellite dishes door to door. They had a lot of tough times as a young family. And it was, his son was getting ready to go decide on school. And he said, wouldn't it be great if there's just somewhere where you could go learn from entrepreneurs, go make money now instead of going into college, going into debt? Higher education's broken in this country, right? And that was the impetus for Millionaire University, a school for entrepreneurs where entrepreneurs teach other people, whether young, middle-aged, old, whatever, how to be entrepreneurs. And the main driver of that was the podcast. So, and ironically, Justin found me through a podcast I was on 3 years ago. Shout out to Nick Loper and the Side Hustle Show. He found me on that show, asked me if I'd come on and talk about how I built my little marketing company, Ricochet Digital. I said, sure, absolutely. So I came on, had a great interview. He and I stayed in contact for a few months afterwards, and we realized we got along pretty well. We had similar entrepreneurial bones in our body. And one of the days he said, we need some help starting to get our marketing off the ground with this. And it's all about who, not how. I'd love for you to come aboard. And we'd like you to be a partner in this, earn equity. We'll pay you too. And while you're at it, do you want to help me host the podcast? And I was like, yes to all the above. I've never hosted a podcast, but I'm down to learn. I like talking, so I can do that. And that's how I came aboard with Millionaire University. And man, it's been awesome. I love hosting the pod. I get to meet so many awesome people, so many awesome entrepreneurs that I otherwise wouldn't have the chance. You being one of them, Kurt, we would have never met if it weren't for the podcast. So that's been awesome. And, Millionaire University, like you said, we want to help the next generations of entrepreneurs. So we're still developing exactly what that looks like, but it's been the podcast and bringing on awesome entrepreneurs to share their story, inspire our listeners, provide actionable advice, and just expose them to the different things and different concepts in entrepreneurship. So yeah, man, it's been a hell of a time.
That's great, man. A part of my mantra with this stage of my career is really capitalism for good and helping good people do great things. So I'm a big believer in entrepreneurialism, and part of, as you know, part of this show is to inspire the next generation of entrepreneurs. So that really speaks to me. I appreciate that, and I love the podcast that you guys are doing. I looks like you guys, do you release 3 shows a day? It feels like you guys are just blasting out amazing content on the pod.
Yeah, we're a fine oiled machine, Kurt. We're turning out 2 episodes per day, and we started moving to that about 3 weeks, month ago almost. So yeah, it's myself, I host, and then Kirsten, she hosts as well, and then Justin and Tara pop in for a few episodes here and there. And between all of us in this group, we're turning out 2 episodes a day. So it's a lot of content, but for us, we're all about abundance. So the more entrepreneurs that we can put on blast, the more aspiring entrepreneurs or current entrepreneurs that we can inspire. That's kind of what we feel like we're in place to do. And we launched our first program back in October, and then we were even talking about membership opportunities. So we've got a lot of things in the works, but we're really doubling, tripling, quadrupling down on the podcast.
That's awesome. I appreciate that. I love how you're using this as a platform for not just your business, but obviously for other entrepreneurs. Also wanted to visit with you about a couple of other things that are important for me as my platform becomes more. And that is, one is, I know you're a man of faith, and I love how you put that out there and you're not shy away from it. And I'm the same way. I'm speaking more about it in life and in business. And the other is, I want to give you an opportunity to talk about your daughter and Rett syndrome if you'd like. So let's cover either one of those if you'd like.
Yeah, absolutely. So, speaking to the first point of faith, the older I've gotten, the deeper my faith has gotten. Where my wife and I were raised Catholic, and we grew up going to church every Sunday, and that was our childhood. And I feel like a lot of kids, you go to college, and University of Dayton's a Catholic school, so it's always intertwined with us in school. And I went to college, and it was kind of one of those like, I'm on my own, like I don't have to go to church anymore, and da da da, and you kind of veer away a little bit. But once I got older, I got married, and especially once I started having kids, I started realizing just the massive importance of it, the blessings that we have, that myself, my wife, and my family has. And you start realizing, oh, it wasn't just a ritual on Sunday. There's a higher power that's helping you through this life, and I'm by no means where I'm learning every day about and deepening my faith, but that's a big part, and I credit my wife a lot for that too, of course. But having kids will change you in that way as well, and then especially with my firstborn daughter, she has, as you mentioned, Rett syndrome, RETT, and it's a rare neurological disease that affects 1 in every 15,000 female births. So extremely rare disorder that affects every aspect of her life. So essentially, there's a rung in her DNA ladder that was deleted. It's just not there. And what that does is it prevents her from being able to talk. It prevents her from being able to purposefully use her hands. Prevents her from being able to walk on her own. And it provides, like, deals with scoliosis because she can't develop muscles, so she can't hold her head on her shoulders like a normal human can. So, or a neurotypical person can. And so we were presented with that. It was a 10-month journey to find out what was wrong, and we started noticing about 12 months that there was something that wasn't right, and the doctor said something's not right. We need to figure it out. So it was a pretty crushing blow to get a diagnosis like that, but we're fortunate. I remember the day it happened. It was a couple days of grieving, and then it was like, okay, now it's action. This isn't a death sentence. How can we make her life the best life that we could possibly give her? And that's kind of the mission my wife and I have been on since then, is being involved with the Rett syndrome community, being involved with the foundation. We're lucky here in Cincinnati. It's one of 19 clinics around the country there's actually a Rett clinic here. So we have an incredible doctor and team that follow CC. So yeah, man, that having a child with special needs completely changes your life, changes your outlook on life. It changes how you do so many things. It changes how you interact with yourself, right? Like how to, there's so much that we do that other parents will never have to experience. I never want them to experience it, but it provides a unique challenge. But heading back to faith, I think God gave us our CC for a reason, and we're the two parents who are able to handle it the best we possibly can. So, but yeah.
Well, I'm glad you said that, because I was going to ask you, of faith, that is part of the world, and the hand that you've been dealt, and the hand that Cece's been dealt. And it sounds like she's in good hands with good parents that are believers, and recognize that there's a reason she's in your life. And
Yeah.
and you hit the nail on the head with the parents of special needs. I think there's a special place in heaven for sure for the parents with special needs. And I think that what I've seen for the families I've been around is the life and energy and joy that is often brought into their lives as a result of that child. Obviously, a lot of challenges and a lot of joy. So,
Yeah, for sure. And she's the happiest, smiliest kid you'll ever meet. It's a good way to describe it is the lights are on and somebody's home. She just can't tell you. So she uses her eyes to tell you in her smiles. So yeah, she's a blessing. And it's just a different lifestyle.
well, for anybody who's interested, we'll put a link to maybe the Rett Syndrome Association,
Rett-
or whatever the best place.
RettSyndrome.org. Yeah. And
Yeah.
we're always doing fundraisers, and we always have in every September we have our big fundraiser called the Strollathon, where the local Rett children and families go on a stroll around the park and have games and all that. But that's our biggest fundraiser. So yeah, RettSyndrome.org if anybody's interested. We always appreciate donations of any sort. So yeah.
Awesome, Brien. Thank you for sharing. Okay, so we're at the part of the show where I really like to ask about your unlocking move. I know we've covered a little bit already, but is there anything else that touches you as far as something, a big pivotal moment or decision point that really changed your life?
Yeah, I think it goes back to when I was working with my father-in-law, and like I said earlier in the show, I had a lot of time to sit there and be like, what am I doing? Like what's the plan here? And the most pivotal thing in my life was deciding to take that little course in digital marketing, and to have had the good fortune of being on an email list of a guy who knew a guy who was teaching a course on how to do this thing I just discovered 2 months prior, and thought, hey, there's something there. So I feel like there was some sort of divine intervention that led me to following that guy who had a friend who was doing this little course. That was the biggest unlocking move in my life, because when I started that, I said, I'm burning the boats. The bridges are toast. There's no going back. There's no plan B. I'm turning this into a business because this is the key to my career, my professional happiness. And as we all know, your career and your professional life, it bleeds into your personal life, whether you want it to or not. If I'm not happy at my job doing what I do, which for me was, I wasn't going to be happy unless I was calling the shots and running my business, then I was going to have a tough personal life too. And being blessed with the wife I have, I was not about to let her down by not having something solid in a professional life. So, and I have dreams and aspirations. I want to provide everything I possibly can for my family, and money is a tool, right? It's, you use it as a tool to live the life you want to live. And yeah, I think that was probably the big unlocking moment, was taking that little course.
Well, I want to just reiterate a couple of things that you said. First of all, earlier in the show, you talked about things that you liked and things you were good at. That's absolutely great steps towards becoming who and what you want to be. The other is you seize that opportunity. I just can't beat it into the ground enough that you didn't just sit on your laurels. You let these opportunities that came your way, you seized on them. And that's really the, I guess, challenge I want to give to my listeners is when those opportunities arise, look for them and take them.
Yeah. And you have to put yourself out there. You got to go take opportunities as they arise, or go create an opportunity and go and act on it, because I can't tell you how many things I've done that have led to something else, right? Like being on that podcast that led to Millionaire University. At the time, it led to 3 other clients in my business. And going and joining I went to an event last year with a company called Copy Chief. It was copywriting, but I was just like, something's pulling me here. I got to go. And that's where I met my now coach and future partner, Rob Tillman. Like I met him there. Right. And we got connected, and soon to be the rest is history. Like, it's just, you take advantage of these opportunities as they arise. They won't all pan out, but something's going to happen. Something will lead to something that leads to something.
I had a guest on my show maybe a year ago, Elijah May, and he said his secret was saying yes. So when you ask somebody to be on your podcast, say yes. If you have the opportunity to go take this course, say yes. And you never know what's going to come up.
Exactly.
So I like to consider myself the listener's advocate. And I like to think, if I'm in the audience and Kurt's got Brien Gearin on the show, what would I want Kurt to ask him? So I come up with a question, and then I have two other questions that have come to mind along the way. And I want to touch on something that appears to be very, very near and dear to your heart. You are a Cincinnati Reds fan, and you've spent some time at the Great American Ballpark. And it sounds like a few years ago, they switched from Conn's hot dogs to Ballpark Franks, and it pissed you off. Tell me more. Tell me what gets you so fired up about hot dogs at the stadium, Brien.
Damn, you have the best questions, Kurt. Okay, so the Reds switched to Ballpark Franks last year. They didn't tell anyone. In fact, they're lying, patently lying to our faces on the radio and on the outfield wall and across the stadium, where they say Conn's hot dogs, the official hot dogs of the Cincinnati Reds. And for those who haven't had a Conn's hot dog, Conn's is an old-time meat packing company here in Cincinnati. They, over the years, got whittled down, bought out. They were recently bought out by somebody, and all that was left of the Conn's brand was like their hot dogs and their bun-sized Franks, right? And these are the world's best hot dogs, and I freaking love hot dogs, Kurt. And at the ballpark, you get a Conn's hot dog, and you put sauteed peppers and onions on top and a little bit of ketchup. And just, it was nostalgia. It was Cincinnati baseball. You go there, you have a hot dog. If you me, you have four, and you just live the best life. And then all of a sudden, last April or May, I go to my first game, and I get a hot dog, and I'm like, this isn't a Conn's hot dog. What are we doing here? And I got it from a stand that had the lights above it that says Conn's official hot dog of the Cincinnati Reds. And I freak out. Like, I'm like, I wrote, the review that they send you after you buy your ticket after the game. I called in, no one talked to me. And I just, oh my gosh. It's like, what do you do? It's the official hot dog, but they don't sell the hot dogs at the stadium.
Is it possible that Ballpark Franks bought Conn's, and are you putting their shitty hot dogs in the mix?
I have to look up who bought Conn's. I don't think it was Ballpark Frank, though. It would make sense if it was them, because now they're selling the crappy Ballpark Franks, and they're terrible. They're the front to baseball. And even though they got Ballpark in their name.
Brien, I don't want you to worry. This podcast is going to be seen by tens, if not dozens, of people in Cincinnati area that are going to start picketing and rioting at the ballpark.
Good. I will lead that. I will lead that charge, because it needs to change. I miss my hot dogs.
Okay, so I've got two other questions that came to mind, one during the show and one before. The one before was, I saw somewhere that you have two holes in one. Who has one hole in one? You have two? You're freaking charmed.
Yeah. So it was all before I was even in college. So when I was on the 7th grade golf team, I hit my first hole in one. It was a par 3, 150 yards, landed at the front of the green, rolled all the way up, and it was over a little hill, so you couldn't really tell from the tee box. So we get up to the green, and I'm like, where's oh, don't tell me it's in the hole. It's in the hole. And then 4 years later, so that was 04, and then in 08, I'm playing in the best part about these holes in ones is I was like actually in some form of competition. So, people can be like, yeah, right, but who actually watched it? It was in the annual alumni outing with my dad, and I hit a gap wedge about 125 yards, spun it back right into the hole. And those were the crowning achievements of my golf career, were those two holes in one.
So we won't worry about the 8 or the snowman you got on the hole before.
Yeah, don't mind those little guys. Yeah, no, we're just here for the hole in one.
So Brien, I'll tell you, there's many times where I can't see the hole, and I walk up to the green and my ball is not there, and I'm like, it's got to be in the hole. Never once in the hole.
It's in the rough pass.
So here's my other question, only because I look over your right shoulder and I see a Gearin jersey with the number 78, which is obviously a lineman number, and you don't look like a lineman. So what the hell is the story with that?
See, people think I'm not a lineman, but when I was playing 6th grade football and all 95 pounds of me had nowhere else to play because he stunk, the last 30 seconds of every other game, the coach decided to put me on the offensive line. Go figure. And so sometimes I'll joke with people like, oh yeah, that's my college number. Green Bay Packers, I got drafted, had a moment in the sun. But no, that's my 6th grade football jersey that my mother framed years ago.
I was going to say timeout. Who the hell has a 6th grade football jersey on their wall?
Right? Yeah, no, this guy. Yeah, who's got two thumbs and has a 6th grade football jersey? Yeah, no, that was the pride and joy of my mom, because it was the one year she let me play football.
We could do a whole podcast on that jersey, dude. That is awesome. Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah, no, that's what it is. So the truth is out.
One last question is the trick question, and that is, Brien, tell me one question that you're never asked, and either you wish they would ask you or you're secretly glad that they don't ask you?
Ooh, that's a deep one. The question I wish they'd ask me. This is going to sound completely not humble and ridiculous coming from an entrepreneur, and it's totally self-serving. But hey, I'm human. I have some of those thoughts sometimes.
Yep.
And it'll play into an old adage. Nobody ever, very few people in my life ever ask me about my business or how it's going. And I don't care about that at all. But there's always that part of me that's like, I'm interested in what you do for a living, but nobody seems to care. And it's okay because I don't care about it. But there's that one part of me that's like, man, maybe I'm just super curious. I am super curious. I'm always asking people about everything, like just shy of like, hey, what do you earn? Like I'm asking everybody everything. What do you do? Tell me about that. You work in the warehouse? Okay, that's interesting. So, but I never get that question. Rarely. It's the most important people in my life are the ones who do ask and who do care, and I appreciate that. But it plays into the old adage that nobody gives a flying fudge about your business like you do, and they never will. And you know what? That's okay, because I like to fly under the radar anyway. But I would say I'm always interested in that because I ask that question all the time, but it never comes back.
Part of what I appreciate about your question is you're not just asking them about their business, you're asking them about kind of how they're doing. And if their business is sucking, that ties into their mental health and really how they're doing emotionally. And there's so much deeper. And I get a lot of people to ask the how's the weather questions, but not enough people really ask you, like, how are you really doing? Not how you,
right,
but how are you really doing? I appreciate
right.
that.
Yeah.
Well, Brien, on that note, we're going to wrap this puppy up. I really appreciate you coming on. And for all the listeners out there, please go like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, YouTube, you name it. This is also a video version on YouTube. And Brien Gearin, man, thank you so much for joining me.
Kurt, this has been awesome. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here with you.
If you're an entrepreneur and you think you might have outgrown a member of your team, or maybe you've got a mic, as we talked about in Who's Your Mic, check out this quiz at who'syourmic.com/quiz. That's who'syourmic.com/quiz.